I made a Super Metroid cover album live on Twitch using only free software. Let's run down the best software that I was able to find. Hans Zimmer frequently says in interviews something along the lines of, I could score a movie with a cardboard box and a rubber band. He's glossing over some expenses, microphone, computer, software, monitors, etc. But I actually take his point pretty well. This is a guy who has all the money in the world to make music, all the help, all the budget to hire the best orchestral players in the world, synthesizers and all that kind of stuff. And he's trying to emphasize that at the end of the day, it's the creativity, it's the core musical ideas that matter. It's not the stuff, the tools you use. So, leads you to inevitably ask, why do we buy stuff? Why does Hans Zimmer have walls of synthesizers? Why does he have the best microphones that money can buy? Why do I have some synthesizers? Why do I have medium microphones that money can buy? Sometimes our tools save us time. Sometimes they open us up to new sounds that we weren't previously capable of making. And sometimes people are just trying to spend money. As a person who's used a lot of the tools out there, including some pretty expensive ones, what are my favorite free plugins and software that I was able to find? DAW. This one's a no-brainer, and maybe I'm fudging the rules a little bit. It's Reaper. I already use this. This is my primary DAW of choice, and technically Reaper is not free. Although anybody can go online right now. You can download a full-featured version of Reaper, and there's no limitations. You can use it forever. There is going to be a little box that reminds you, hey, this software is not free. We work really hard on this. Please give us some money if you really like it. And of course, I've paid for it. But you can still use it for free for as long as you want. Hopefully, at some point, the guilt outweighs the savings that you're getting on not paying. I love Reaper, and I encourage everybody to check it out. Synthesizers. I use a lot of synths in my music, software and hardware. I was kind of nervous about losing the prospect of some of the tools that I'm just really comfortable with, I really know really well. The first half of it, I was using this synth called Odin 2, which was a really great synth. It was the best one, free one that I was able to find. But I got lucky because halfway through, a brand new synth came out called Vital. Vital instantly beat everything else I was using for free and pretty much has beat everything I've used for money as well. At this point, it's my favorite soft synth that I've used. I'm kind of glad that I was working on this project right when Vital came out because I was able to force myself to get comfortable with it really, really quickly. And once I did, I just fell in love with it. Runner-up is VCV Rack. VCV is a modular Eurorack-like software platform. There's tons and tons of modules. Some of them you're supposed to pay money for, but a lot of them are free. I use the regular VCV Rack a lot. And I also use this unofficial fork called VCVST. It's a little more limited. They don't have all the modules that the main VCV Rack has, but it was enough for me to do a lot of the cool stuff that I wanted to do. Apparently, there's a new version of VCV Rack where you can use it as a plugin coming out soon-ish, but that one's not going to be free. I will be purchasing it the day it comes out because I love VCV Rack. Samples. So I'm going to break this up into 3 sections. There were really sort of 3 types of samples that I wound up using a lot in this project. The first one was electronic drum sounds. I used a lot from these Baker packs. They're processed, but kind of lightly processed. You can stack them pretty well. They've got really modern trap, hip-hop, electronic drum sounds to them. They sound really, really good. And then the runner-up for that is going to be the EDM starter kit. A little more basic in terms of the sounds, but they had some really, really great kicks and snares and hi-hats and stuff. They also had some cool Foley and ambience and atmosphere effects as well that I wound up using a lot of. The next category is going to be rock drum kits. This one only has one entry, and that's the Slate drums. Great sounding kit. Clearly, they want you to pay for more kits. That's why they're giving away one kit for free. But I used the basic one on a bunch of tracks on this album, and they worked great. They sounded great. The next category of samples are a little more specific for the project, but I needed Metroid-y 90s samples. And these are sometimes called Rompler sounds. The one that I was able to find is called the Floristan Basic. It's a little weird. It's really very 90s sounding. And I played it out of a sound font player called DSK, but it worked perfectly for this project. The last category of great plugins that I was able to find are EQs. I used 2 of them from Tokyo Dawn Records. Tokyo Dawn is a record label, but they also make plugins. They have some paid versions, but their free ones are really, really great. The main one that I used was TDR Nova, which is a totally kick-ass EQ. It easily beats most of the built-in EQs that come with your DAW. It rivals my favorite EQ, FabFilter Pro Q3. I probably like FabFilter a little bit better, but if in this project I only used Nova and I really didn't miss very much. The runner-up is another one from Tokyo Dawn. It's called Slick EQ. It's a bit more of an old school workflow for the EQ. I specifically used it because there are some cool vintage saturation algorithms that I used a fair bit to crunch up the sound a little bit. Okay, now we're getting into the area of sounds that I really started to miss some of my paid plugins. So the first one is saturation/distortion. I love FabFilter Saturn, and I just wasn't able to find a great replacement for it. Towards the very end of the project, I found this one, Tritic Crush, which is by far the closest to getting the subtle crunch, distortion-y sounds that I was looking for. But much of the project, I didn't know that plugin existed, and I was using this one, Ferric TDX by Variety of Sound. This one I needed to stack multiple of them together because 100% on this plugin wasn't enough. So if I had 3 or 4 layered on top of each other, it started to get the sound that I was looking for. The next category is reverb. Here's another place where I really found myself missing some of my favorite paid reverbs. The main one that I used is Oral River, great sounding reverb. And for free, by far the best one that I was able to find. I could get a lot of subtle room sounds and subtle stage sounds. I was really able to dial in and get the sounds that I was looking for using this one. But my favorite reverbs usually come from Valhalla, and the algorithms on Oral River were maybe a little lacking in comparison to my favorite reverbs, just a little bit. The runner-up is actually from Valhalla. It's called Super Massive, and of course it sounds great because everything from Valhalla does, but it's not as versatile as some of their paid plugins, which aren't that expensive, all things considered. They're about $50. But Supermassive was really good for supermassive, big spacey washes and stuff like that. For more subtle sounds, it probably wasn't the best, but I did use it a fair bit. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Tal Reverb 2 and Tal Reverb 4. These were made to be put into synthesizers. They're actually in Serum, these same reverbs. So one of the things that Vital is lacking a little bit are the delay and the reverb sounds. I'm not a huge fan of their effects, essentially. So what I often wound up doing is I used Vital to make my sound, and then I used Tal Reverb 2 or 4, and then basically you're getting a Serum-like sound at that point, almost identically, sometimes better. The next category are delays. I wound up using Sanford delay the most. It's a very clean, straightforward delay. No frills, always did what I needed it to do. Nothing fancy, but a great sounding delay. The runner-up, which actually I probably would have used more, but I forgot about it when I was making this album, is called Nasty DLA by Variety of Sound. This is also pretty basic, but it's got some cool chorusy and color effects and stuff like that, which actually would have worked really well on this album. I think I only used it a handful of times, mostly because I forgot. Miscellaneous effect, which doesn't really get categorized very well, is the wow and flutter. On this project, I needed a lot of pitch detuny, kind of making these sounds sound like I sampled them off of vinyl, and this was perfect for that. I've got some other paid plugins that I often will do that with, but this worked just the way I needed it to. One more honorable mention I'm going to say is the Melda bundle. This is a collection of a whole bunch of different pretty basic plugins. Most of this stuff you can get in, it comes stock with your DAW, but I wound up using a fair bit of them. The chorus, the compressor, the distortion a little bit. One use case that I could really see out of this Melda bundle is if you were switching back and forth between DAWs and you didn't want to relearn some stock plugins over and over again, you could just use the Melda bundle and you could really unify your workflow in a real way. Let's recap. Which of these plugins am I going to keep using now that my plugin embargo has been lifted and I can use anything on my computer? Well, Reaper, of course. I guess that's not a plugin. I'm always using Reaper. Vital, it's one of the best soft synths I've ever used. VCV Rack, nothing comes close to it free or paid in terms of modular Eurorack-like workflow. Which of these plugins come close to any of the paid plugins that I use every day? TDR Nova, no question, it's a great sounding EQ. It's probably better than most of the stock EQs that come in DAWs. All of the samples that I used, as good as any paid samples that I've ever been able to find. So these were really, really powerful samples. Which areas did I find myself lacking a little bit and really kind of missing my paid software? The saturation and distortion plugins, I missed them. The reverbs, I missed them. And the delays, I missed them. So that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like and subscribe. You can check out the music. I've got a link in the comments, and I'd love to know what you think.